I was aware that the possibility that Brother Joe wasn't going to be here, and so I was asked if maybe I had something. And I didn't have time to really go into a fully developed situation from the time that we were aware that he probably wasn't going to be here. It's not like I don't have many other topics I could have gone into, because I do. And I want to save some for another day too. But I chose this one for a particular reason. One, because I already had it done. Second, is because it reminds me, as I mentioned, we're going to have a Bible study going and studying the book of Revelation, and it may be an eternal Bible study before we're through. But nevertheless, you come across things as you go in the book of Revelation. You know, the book of Revelation has 404 verses and has about 800 references to the Old Testament. And so you've got to know your Old Testament, and when you know your Old Testament, the book of Revelation clarifies itself.
Did you say 800 revelations?
Yeah, 800 references to the book of the Old Testament. Yes. Almost double the references as there are verses in the book. It's very intriguing, and so that's why you're going to have to go back and look at the stories or the references and get the intent there and bring that forward enter that into the book of Revelation, and then you gather your understanding from the book of Revelation. You cannot, there is no way in this world you can just sit down and go to the book of Revelation and read and say, this means this, this means this, this means this, without any going back to these references in the Old Testament. I mean, and so a lot of people do it. So there's books out there in Revelation, they hardly ever refer to this stuff in the Old Testament. And I don't know why they don't do that, because it's so obvious. But anyway, that being said, also the other thing that happens with all this is there's so many tangents or rabbit holes that you want to run down when you come across things. I mean, I like to study this a little more. I like to know about this a little more, and so you want to do all that. But on the other hand, when you start running those things, sometimes you lose the main thoughts that you're trying to present, and so it gets distracting, no matter how interesting it is. One of those things I want to look at here is the book of life, and I know we've read about the book of life. It comes up in the book of Revelation a lot of times, but I just want to look at, for information purposes only this morning, we're going to look at the verses. You tell me what we're kind of concluding here after we look at these verses on the book of life. But when I was teaching on the Church of Sardis, of course, it comes up to the Church of Sardis. And one of the promises, now the Church of Sardis, had nothing good. It was bad. But it did get to this verse, and it says, he who overcomes shall be clothed in white garments, and I will not blot out his name from the book of life, but I will confess his name before my Father and before his angels. Interesting verse. First, I was just talking about the book of life, and a lot of times that's what we read. We just read that verse and say it talks about the book of life. But back up, it has a little tidbit of information there before that. Blot his name out of the book of life. Well, let's go toward the end of the book and back up through it. Revelation 22:19, and if anyone takes away from the words of the book of this prophecy, God shall take away his part from the book of life from the holy city. Now again, let's gather information as we go along here about the book of life. If you take away, God shall take away his part from the book of life. Revelation 21:27, but only those whose name is written in the Lamb's book of life. Revelation 20:12, and I saw the dead, small and great, standing before God, and books were opened, and another book was opened, which is the book of life, and the dead were judged according to their works by the things which are written in the books. Revelation 20:15, and whosoever was not found written in the book of life was cast into the lake of fire. Revelation 17:8. You see, like I say, Revelation is just full of the references to the book of life. The beast that you saw was and is not, and is about to come up out of the abyss and go to destruction. And those who dwell on the earth, whose names has not been written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, will wonder when they see the beast that he was and is not and will come. Now there's another little piece of information about the book of life, isn't it? Whose name has not been written in the book of life from the foundation of the world. Here's another reference outside of Revelation now. And I entreat thee also, true yoke fellow, help those women which labored with me in the gospel, which Clement also, and with other my fellow laborers, whose names are in the book of life. Luke 10:20, nevertheless do not rejoice in this, that the spirits are subject to you, but rejoice that your names are written in heaven. Hebrews 12:22 and 23, but you have come to Mount Zion and to the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem, and to the myriads of angels, and to the general assembly and church of the firstborn who are enrolled in heaven, and to God the judge of all, and to the spirits of the righteous made perfect. So we're not, it doesn't expressly tell us in some of these references we're talking about the book of life, but it is telling us about an enrollment somewhere. Some names are written down. Psalm 56:8. You keep track of all my sorrows. You have collected all my tears in your bottle. You have recorded each one in your book. Psalm 139. We use this for a lot of different reasons, but you saw me before I was born. Every day of my life was recorded in your book. Every moment was laid out before a single day had passed. So it was recorded in your book. There. Exodus 32 and 33. But now, if you will, forgive their sin, and if not, please blot me out. This is Moses, of course. Blot me out from your book which you have written. The Lord said to Moses, whosoever has sinned against me, I will blot him out of my book. And that's from Deuteronomy. The Lord shall never be willing to forgive him, but rather the anger of the Lord and his jealousy will burn against that man, and every curse which is written in this book will rest on him, and the Lord will blot out his name from under heaven. So let's just stop right there and look at those texts right there, and what do we get out of those texts? What does it suggest to us out of those texts?
That they're recorded.
That there's a book, okay, and we recorded. What else?
The book can be changed. I mean, people's names can be added and people's names can be subtracted from it.
Okay, hold on to that thought. What else? Okay, let's go back to the part and the verse where it says that the names are written there. When? The foundation, they were written. What does that suggest? If they're written from the foundation, does that suggestion predestination? Because our usual thinking of the book of life is that we're written into the book of life. That's our usual thinking, isn't it? And so when we say that about written in since the foundation, then we come up with predestination. What if we changed our thought a little bit?
Yeah, which world is it?
Which world is it?
Which world? Before the foundation of which world?
Before the foundation of this world or the new heaven and the new earth, is that what you're suggesting?
There is going to be a new world. Before the foundation of the new world. That thought come in.
Yeah.
Well, I always go back to John, verse 1, chapter 1. For in the beginning was the Word.
Okay.
It says the Word was God, and the Word was with God. And I'll tell you, that's what I feel like You know, if the Word was with God at all times. So was the Book of Life, so was whatever you were, I missed what you had based this on,
Okay.
but it's just like the seed in a man, you know, to bear a child. So was, I feel like the Word of God and what it says, whatever from the foundation of the world, it was always in God.
Okay.
I think that my personal opinion is that it's the plan of God. I think God had a plan from the beginning of the time that He created the earth, and then each and every one of us, in His mind, had a plan for us, and that we were born according to His plan, and then whether or not we will live up to our potential for Him to be righteous, we will be added or taken out of the book of life.
Okay. That's interesting, taken out of the book of life.
So once our name's in there, it's not permanent. It can be blotted out.
Which, that's an interesting thing to suggest also, because that defeats your once saved, always saved kind of concept. Because if it can be blotted out, means that,
The teacher wrote in chapter 3 of Ecclesiastes about there being a time for everything and a season for every activity under heaven. For example, there's a time to plant and a time to uproot. Now that's God's plan, that there's a time to plant your seed in the ground, there's a time to harvest it. But if a man really wants to, he can plant his seed in October and try to harvest it in April if he wanted to. He has the freedom to do that. Of course, not going to be a good result, but man has the freedom to be able to go against the plan of God if he so desires. That's why I personally think that names can be taken out of the book of life. God doesn't want anyone to perish, but if a person makes the decision that they don't want to be with him, God's not going to force them.
okay. Okay, here's my suggestion, what it says to me. What it says to me when we put all the passages together is that everybody's name, everybody's name was once in the book of life. You're not written in the book of life, you are in the book of life, you're blotted out of the book of life when you reach the point where you can no longer make a decision for God. And so you're blotted. In fact, this blotted out keeps coming up all the time. Here's the basis for that. In the biblical times, when each city would take care of a census every year, and in taking a city census every year, they would include, of course, the new births, but they also would erase out of their books those who had died. And so they kept their census that way, or blotted out of their book. And so they kept a current thing. But it was always a book that's dealing with the living and not with the dead. That's why it's called the book of life. It's always dealing. And so what is it that, if what I suggest is true, there are at least two things that I see come out of that. You see any of them, either any of them. There are at least two things I see. If it's true that everybody's still alive today, still written in the book of life, and when they reach the point where they can no longer make a decision for Christ, then they're blotted out of the book. What are some of the suggestions of what that might mean?
Didn't accept
Lake of
Jesus.
fire.
Yeah, what?
The lake of fire.
Okay, well, if you're blotted out, yeah, and that says that to us in one of the verses. What else does it say to us?
They didn't come to know Jesus.
And they didn't come to know Jesus. Let's go on the positive.
It's the only way.
Let's go on the positive side of this.
That they do know, that they chose him, that they...
Positive side.
On the positive side.
That they will be included in his kingdom in that book.
And
They will be included in His kingdom if they're in the book, huh?
it'll never be removed
No.
in that case.
Okay, here's one of the things.
Yeah.
Yeah, here's one of the things it suggests to me. It suggests God's great love and that He never gives up. What is it? I am not willing that any should perish. Right? but all should come to a knowledge. And so he never gives up, and he keeps you in that book of life till you can't make the decision any longer. So you're in the book of life, you get yourself out of the book of life, essentially is what happens. That's what the first thing I see. And it talks about God's great love. That's what it is. God's love is immense, and he never gives up on us. Even though we give up on other people sometimes, we get discouraged by what they say, and we look at some of these people who are vocal about their atheism or their anti-God stuff, and they're just a part of us that say, oh, hit them with the lightning bolt, don't we? And that's part of it. But that's not the way God looks at that. He's still waiting for them, hoping for them, and he keeps them there with the anticipation that maybe, they're going to make a decision. That's one of the things I see. Now, you don't have to agree with me, but look at these passages over and see if you're written in the creation of the world, and the only thing it doesn't say about writing in, it says blotting out. So that suggests to me that we're taking names out and not adding names in. Now, there's a second thing here, and this is kind of from a pastoral perspective to answer a question that comes up on some occasions, and it's a tragic occasion, but there is a pastoral perspective here to answer a question that some people have. You think what that might be? It's one of the hardest.
Young?
Huh?
The death of the young?
That's right. One of the hardest moments for a pastor is when a child dies and the parents ask the question, why? And what about them? Because they haven't been able to make a decision. I mean, we have, whether infants or a child, they have not been able to make the decision. I think this answers that question. They have been written into the book of life, and that's where God keeps them, is in the book of life. Yeah. It's a hard question to answer because, and for me, that answers that question. Huh?
Because they weren't given.
They didn't, an infant obviously has not had, the opportunity to make a decision. Even a very young child. We're still teaching them right and wrong and teaching them the stuff. But I get confronted. I've had, situations where that happened, and they want to know the answer. There's no answer that really is sufficient for the day, but I think that this does answer, or sufficient for the hurt, I guess, but it does answer, I think, the question about their future, So those are two of the things that I see if my conclusion is right about these verses. But I always, for years, when I would read about the book of life, I always pictured that I was being written into it, until I started looking at it and seeing all this references to being blotted. When Moses says, blot me out of the book, he knew he was in the book. So he said, just blot me out, And then certainly the references are there in the book of Revelation also. Okay, any other questions or comments?
You're tying in 1 Timothy 2:4 about God wants everybody to be saved.
Sure.
You're saying that was established in the foundation. Well,
Sure.
That's an interesting and somewhat new thought to me.
Yeah.
Very good.
No, he does. I mean, and he gives you opportunity at the very end, because he never gives up on you.
That may be the reason Satan's released for a short season at the end of the 1,000-year reign. Those young babies may have an opportunity during the 1,000-year reign to either keep their name in the book of life or not.
Well, there's all sorts of possibilities and all sorts of thought patterns about what all that could mean, certainly. And we get outlines of prophetic material, and then we kind of imagine other things to go with it. And a lot of times our eschatology, or even our theology, is based upon hopes rather than real evidence, and we have to be careful. I mean, it's just like not long ago, some of you may have seen this post on Facebook that I had. I was driving to church one Saturday morning, and the sky was absolutely beautiful. And I took a picture of it, but then I made a comment about, how you have these random thoughts about the kingdom. You just pop into your mind. When I was looking at that, I was thinking about that. Okay, so we have the kingdom, and we know all about the streets of gold, the pearl gates, the river of life, the tree of life, all that stuff. But then your imagination looks at that sky and you say, wouldn't it be grand? And I usually the illustration of a kaleidoscope, that all the time the sky was changing. So you had all these pretty pictures all the time of the sky. Now, it never says anything about all of that stuff, but wouldn't that be a beauty? That's a natural beauty. Don't you like looking at the sunrise, the sunset, and look at all those colors and things? That's a natural beauty God's gift. So I was thinking about that, and I suggested that, maybe we want to slide down the gates of pearl and throw fruit from the tree of life and go in our stocking feet and slide across those golden streets, and I said maybe even go skinny dipping in the river of life. But we just imagine, we can't imagine that stuff, and that's what it says, doesn't it? Eyes not seen, ears not heard, never in the thoughts of man, the things which God has prepared for those who love. But your imagination goes wild. I think about this, what are we going to do? And what is it going to be like? And why is some of this stuff there anyway? And so I just, a lot of times I just run with that stuff and think about that stuff. I try to fill in gaps of just the briefest outline that God gives us, and we all have fun with that, don't we? So, okay, anything else? Because I'm way off subject line that I was initially talking about, but I just wanted to present that to you as a thought pattern. You work with it how you want and how you see fit, and see if I'm way off base or not. But it doesn't. There are actually more references than we have. Now, I said all that to this. So let's suggest that what I said is right. And very few times do people say that I'm right. So, but let's just pretend, okay? Can we pretend that I'm right in that thought pattern? Okay, here's the joker. Revelation 13:8. And all that dwell upon the earth shall worship him whose names are not written in the book of life of the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world. So when you get to look at this verse, it seems to give you a different idea a little bit. So I thought, one of the things, and I mentioned this even this morning in our discussion, one verse in the Bible is not going to discount a bunch of other verses. So if you got one verse that kind of gives you a different thought, then you got to take a look at what it is. And so when we were doing this in our class, one of the ladies, she had one of those study Bibles, those are good. I mean, they got some good things in them. And she's got one of those study Bibles, and she was reading this, and I was amazed the creativity of the information that was in that study Bible, because they, again, filling in the gaps, they filled in a lot of gaps with some information in theirs. But here, so I looked at this, and then I got to looking and comparing the other translations. And this is the clearest translation, although no, that's not it. Here it is. Revelation 13:8. This is the clearest of them, but there are several translations that go along the same line, and when you redo this verse a little bit and put it in the right sync, it answers. And all that dwell upon the earth shall worship it, whose names are not written in the book of the life of the Lamb that was slain from the foundation. So, whereas the King James puts the book as the foundation, here it has the Lamb that was slain from the foundation, which is perfectly correct with the other scriptures. And so it seems like it harmonizes everything. It harmonizes the Bible, it harmonizes the book of Revelation, it harmonizes the book here and everything. Now, there are two books mentioned in the Bible, the books of generation of Adam, Genesis 5:1, and the one of Jesus Christ in Matthew 1:1, two genealogies Matthew 5:1 says, this is the book of the genealogy of Adam. In the day that God created man, he made him in the likeness of God. And then Matthew 1:1, the book of the genealogy of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham. So what do you have? You have the book of Adam, which is the book of death, and you have the book of Jesus, which is the book of life. And so he really wraps those all little key things up. And hardly ever notice, never pay attention to those little subtleties in the Word. But that's the beauty of studying the Word, is all these little subtle things that are there, and it shows a wonderful harmony of the Bible. It's just all beyond my imagination, the things.